My name is Leckie, and I am the author of Provenance. The first science fiction I was exposed to that I remember was actually 2001: A Space Odyssey. At the time, my biological parents were going through a divorce, and the adult who was in charge of me for that weekend, 2001 was showing at a local theater. That was at the time when you couldn't just rent a movie or anything, right? You had to like be at the theater to see it or you wouldn't see it. And they really wanted to see it, so they took 4-year-old me down to the theater to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. I can tell you that left quite an impression on me. That's the first science fiction that I remember being exposed to, but there may have been others. Authors who inspired me, Andre Norton is actually a big one, and I suspect a lot of authors have been. I don't know if she's read as much as she used to be, but she wrote a lot of what at the time was called juvenile science fiction, and was super, super influential, I think, has had an influence on way more writers than I think many people realize. Another author who's had a huge influence on me is C.J. Cherryh, particularly her Foreigner books, which I absolutely adore, and Jack Vance, who's another name who, very famous author, fabulous author, worth reading, even though he's maybe a little old-fashioned by today's standards, but absolutely beautiful, beautiful prose. I definitely wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. Part of that is because, for some reason, for whatever reason, my parents were convinced that I was going to be a writer when I grew up, and so they gave me lots of advice and information about how to conduct myself as a professional writer and what I should do. And so I guess I just grew up with people around me assuming that that was what I was going to do, and it seemed like it would be pretty cool. Every now and then, especially in my teens, I would feel kind of inadequate because I didn't actually write very much. And in college, my writing just sort of shut down completely except for school, and I thought, well, I guess everybody was wrong. I'm not really going to be a writer. But in the end, they turned out to be right. It would be really difficult for me to choose a favorite character to write. They're all... Breck, obviously, is wonderful to write, which is super fortunate because, of course, the entire trilogy is from her point of view, so I would be out of luck if I didn't like writing her, but she was a lot of fun to write. In the trilogy, though, coming in second would be the Pressger translators, who I had so much fun writing. In particular, the translator Leckie. I know a lot of people say Leek, but I say Leckie, but however you say it is fine. She was so much fun, and she was on stage for such a short period of time, and I couldn't manage to make her be on stage longer, so when the third book came around, I promised myself that translator Zayat would get as much screen time as I could give her because the Pressger translators were just so fun to write. I'm not sure any of the characters are particularly like me. I think they all probably have something of me in them because you can't write a character who you totally don't understand, and so some of that understanding is going to come from yourself. But there aren't any characters in the book who I strongly identify with, or who I'm like, that's me on the page. When I wrote Ancillary Justice, I threw in as many space opera tropes as I possibly could. But one that I tried to get in there but really didn't, that's a favorite of mine, is the ancient alien artifact, right? I really wanted to do something with archaeological digs and alien ruins. And in the end, there isn't actually a whole lot of that in Provenance, but that base pull, it sort of steps off from that idea, and that was still super compelling to me, and I wanted to work through my thoughts about that.